should a poem be? How many lines make a good poem? Maybe you've looked at these questions, asked yourself, and wondered how long a poem can be. So in this session, I thought I'd do something different. I've taken two poems, a poem from the 17th century and another from the 19th century, almost 200 years apart. But both the poets are great poets, John Dryden of the Restoration Age and Robert Browning of the Victorian Age. Just in passing, I would like to mention that the Restoration Age is when King was restored back from France. He came back, Charles II. And when we talk about the Victorian Age, we are talking about Queen Victoria and her long reign from 1835, I beg your pardon, to 1901. Dryden's poem that we have is Happy the Man. Short poems, as I mentioned, and therefore I'm going to read the entire poem. Happy the man, and happy he alone, he who can call today his own, he who secure within can say, tomorrow do thy worst, for I have lived today. Be fair or foul or rain or shine, the joys I have possessed in spite of fate are mine. Not heaven itself upon the past has power, but what has been, and I have had my hour. As I mentioned, I've taken two poems because I think 200 years apart, they are still talking of the same thing. And what is that? Do not worry, life is meant to be lived. So the poem begins, Dryden's poem begins, happy the man who can call today his own. What does that mean? Live in the present. And then the last but one line of the poem says, not heaven itself upon the past has power. When heaven itself cannot recall the past, cannot push back time, what power do I as a human being have? So let me live in the present and let me enjoy myself. Some people consider this to be a paraphrase of a Horatian ode, not his own. Whatever it is, after all, Dryden was a great poet, a poet laureate too. The other poem that I'm looking at is a poem called Pippa's Song. It's from Pippa Passes, a series of dramatic pieces written by Robert Browning. Remember, Robert Browning and Tennyson are the two important poets of the Victorian Age. He was a poet, playwright, but his greatest contribution to British poetry, English poetry, are his monologues. We call them dramatic monologues. So the poem I have here for you from Browning is Pippa's Song, which is from Pippa's Passes, which actually has morning, noon, evening, and night. But this poem is about the morning. What does the poem say? The years at the spring, days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew-pearled, the larks on the wing, the snails on the thorn. And I love these two lines. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. Isn't that what Dryden also said? If you live in the present, you are happy. No one can push back time. And this is what Pippa says. Pippa's a young girl of 14. She's had a tough life, but that's another story because I'll have to go into the entire work called Pippa Passes. She's been abused by her employer, etc., etc. But look at her. As she wanders around the streets early in the morning, she's able to tell us, God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. 200 years apart, two great poets writing about the same theme. So I thought I'd bring them together and tell us how the thematic concerns could be the same even 200 years apart. Happy the Man is a Horatian ode in translation, they say. It's in the form of the heroic couplet with very, very irregular meter. But Dryden lived in the Restoration age, where classical poetry was still very important. And therefore, one would notice that he does include metaphors, for example, in his poem. For example, when he talks about rain or shine, what is he talking about? He's talking about the ups and downs of life. The entire tone of the poem, I do want to tell you, is very, very optimistic. And that is why I chose this poem, because most of Dryden's poems are not really talking about some simple ideas or themes, but he's able to do it. And that's why I chose this poem. The poem, if it is a translation, I must say, it is a fantastic translation. Some critics suggest that it's probably just a paraphrase because the idea is the same. Notice how the meter is very different. And what do I mean by that? If you look at the poem, you will notice that not all lines are of the same length, because you will notice that the right-hand side margin does not exist in this poem that we are looking at of Dryden. When I look at Pippa Passes, which is Robert Browning, as I mentioned, we could see that the poem does have a very, very clear rhyme scheme. So you have spring and wing. Remember, I talk about A, B, B, C, etc. So if you look at this poem, Pippa Passes, Pippa's song from Pippa Passes, so you've got spring, morn, seven, pearled, first 4 lines. And then the next 4 lines are wing, thorn, heaven, world. So if I'm talking about a rhyme scheme, I'd have to say ABCD, ABCD. A very, very clear natural description is what this poem has. Pippa is a young girl I've already mentioned, and therefore the poem, the song that she's singing, is indeed very, very simple. The age in which Browning wrote was a little troubling, because that was the age which we call the age of compromise, where there was this conflict between science and religion. If you remove religion, can science step in? So we had all these problems in the Victorian age, and the poets too did look at it. So it is interesting when you find a poem like this, where it is a very, very simple acceptance of the existence of God, who is there to take care of you. It's a verse drama from which the song has been taken. So I want you to use your imagination and think of the stage where Pippa probably walks across the stage singing this song. Recitation used to be an important part of my school days. You know, we used to get marks for recitation. That means you learnt a poem by heart and then you recited it. We talk of viva today, we talk of interviews today, but I think giving marks for recitation is out. But if I had to have recitation in class today, I would ask my students to look at poems like these, because these lines stay with you. For example, I'm saying that again, the last 2 lines of Pippa's song. So I love to go back to poems like these. I love to remember how I recited them. And then maybe the teacher gave you a pat, or you know that you got more marks for that. Come on, why don't you try to do the same? Try to learn poems by heart and share it with your friends. As I say, a wonderful pastime for a rainy day.